Well, hello, Dr. Childress back on Facebook Live. In this particular segment, I want to talk about Richard Gardner and parental alienation syndrome, as well as touch on Richard Rorschach and the family bridges um, situation there. Uh, and oh my goodness, I have so much work to do, but the universe keeps sending me these like, say this, and oh my God, that's I can't not do it at this point in time. And so Gardner and PAS, I hope everybody's clear that I hate parental alienation syndrome, and we need to make it go away. Everything that everybody complains about parental alienation and parental alienation syndrome, all the critics of it, I am in total agreement with them. So it is the worst construct that has ever been developed in the history of like the universe. And so, if there's any doubt about my position on parental alienation and parental alienation syndrome, you can go to my website and there's a YouTube section. And you go down and there's a series I do of reactions to Gardner's 8 symptoms. When I first came over, I'd never heard of this parental alienation thing. I had been in psychology my entire life from an undergrad. So, psychology degree, I'd been working suicide prevention center back as an undergrad, all the way to a master's degree and all the way to now. And I never, ever heard of the word parental alienation because the pathology doesn't exist. But I come over to the court involved place, this forensic place, which is a zone apart from all of other psychology. I come in here and you guys are like, bizarre, made up pathologies, and you're fighting about them. I'm like, no, that's awful. And so I did a reaction on my videos to each of the 8 symptoms. And so it's like on the YouTube right now, all these reaction videos are really popular, like music reaction ones, and I like them. I go to watch some of the ones I like are the young black kids who are getting introduced to my music, from the 60s and stuff. So like watching like a young black kid first introduction to Ozzy Osbourne and War Pigs. And like, well, that's interesting music, Ozzy and War Pigs. That's probably not his musical taste, but it'll be interesting to see his first introduction to War Pigs. And so that kind of, and you see it all over the internet. People enjoy reliving the reactions of others to the event. It's like taking your kid to Disneyland. I've been to Disneyland. Disneyland opened in 1955. I was born in 1955. I'm in Southern California. Every year I've been to Disneyland. I know. But when you take your kids, you get to experience it through their eyes. And so that reaction videos. So, Gardner's PAS, when I first got over here and was looking around trying to orient to what's happening, I ran into that and I started to look at it. And I looked at the 8 symptoms and I tried to use them in the case, but oh my God, they look awful. But my first reaction to looking at what this parental alienation thing is, and so I thought I would recreate for you a reaction video of Dr. Childress as a clinical psychologist reacting to parental alienation like the first time I ran into these symptoms. And, oh my God, it's awful. It doesn't even get off like the first or second word because before it becomes just a nightmare of a diagnostic model. But so if there's any doubt about me and parental alienation, I hope I'm clear. The other thing, and I've written blog about this, and I want to be very clear, Richard Gardner made some very distasteful comments about something were wrong. And so if anybody wants to jump on how Richard Gardner was wrong in what he says, I'm totally on board with that. Now, I know Freudian psychology, and I wouldn't apply Freudian psychology necessarily nowadays. But he was, I hear, a Freudian, and the ideas he was saying were Freudian, and so I understand the conceptual model he's coming from. Not a good one. But Freud, not a pedophile. Like Freud, he's Freud. And he came up with the libidinal instinct, and sex is a big thing with Freud, like the Oedipal complex. They actually accused Freud kind of being pedophile when he came out with that Oedipal thing early on. So there's, yeah, anytime you get around the sex abuse, you're accused of being a pedophile, interestingly enough. So, but I want to talk about um, uh, Gardner and parental alienation syndrome from a sort of meta perspective of what it's not only did I encounter it and go, holy cow, but then I started to look at the history of how it's been used and what you people have been doing with it and what's going on. Because I've been trained in organizational development, organizational consulting as a master's program, and that's what you do. You come in and you first do like an analysis of what's going on here, and you talk to the various players and find it out. So I did this, what's going on, reading all the articles and stuff. And so I want to talk about parental alienation syndrome on that. And I want to talk about Richard Rorschach and Family Bridges because Family Bridges and Rorschach have drawn the fire of the flying monkey crew of this pathology. And so, as long as we are highlighting the parallel process between what's going on outside and what's going on in psychology, I want to highlight the role of the flying monkeys and the false allegations and the slander and lies against mental health professionals relative to the parental alienation issue and what happened with that. So, I just like with my discussions of what's happening with Trump and the Trump cult, it's not political. I'm not taking a political stance. I'm talking about diagnosis and a pathology, and I'm using a parallel process to describe it. I'm going to be doing a similar thing and talking about PS. I don't like PS. I'm not endorsing PS. Heavens no. But I'm discussing it to highlight a feature of the pathology and what it does. So, with parental alienation syndrome, when I first came over here, I encountered that. Then I started to do the research, and I ran into this interesting article from Richard Rorschach that said he can solve the pathology using this workshop model in a couple of days. Now, there's no psychotherapy model that can do that. Okay, there's no possibility of doing a psychotherapy model that you can recover this kid in a couple of days. But I see this article by Richard Rorschach, and I go, So I'm trying to find out what he's doing so I can understand it, but he doesn't ever report on the protocol he does or the methodology he uses, which is problematic in psychology. These trademarked therapies are problematic. Freud doesn't trademark psychoanalysis. Mnuchin doesn't trademark structural family systems therapy. In psychology, we share knowledge, and because it has to do with patient care. And so Mnuchin writes a book and tells me all about family systems therapy, so I can do family systems therapy mostly from what he tells me if I understand it. Now, I may want to get additional training and supervision consultation as well. Yay, good. But that's, as far as Mnuchin goes, he's sharing his knowledge in his book, and I pay for it by buying the book. And that's how we do it. We don't hold on to our specialized knowledge and make everybody come to us, because that's like hurting people. We share knowledge in healthcare. In healthcare, this is healthcare, because if we hold knowledge, people won't have a problem. We share knowledge, but then we get reimbursed in other ways and other factors. So I'm trying to find out what Family Bridges does. I don't know, but I note it. Then I look at Gardner and PAS and what happened with him, and he got way off bad. What happened was, he's a psychiatrist, first off. He's not a psychologist. He's trained as a medical doctor, not as in psychology. He doesn't know family systems. He doesn't know attachment pathology. He doesn't know all the psychology stuff. So actually, he's practicing beyond the boundaries of competence, which a lot of people do over here, and it's okay. But it's not, but it's okay. So he comes in and he says, I'm seeing this pattern here. Yes, you are. It's a trauma pattern. It's a ripple of child abuse. I'm seeing this pattern here of false allegations, and it seems to be around something around these false allegations of sex abuse. Yes, that's a ripple of sex abuse, but it's not just that. It's this narcissistic thing, I want to share a delusion. He's just seeing a small piece of it. It's like the elephant. So he fills up an elephant's leg and says, I see a tree. No, it's an elephant, but you just don't see the rest. And that's what he did. And the failure is he didn't constrain himself within standards of practice, which is what's the diagnosis. You apply the knowledge for the diagnosis. And he excused himself from those rules. He said, I'm going to make up a whole new pathology, this parental alienation syndrome, rather than constraining myself into applying knowledge I'm going to create. That's the narcissistic thing. He doesn't apply, he thinks he's this grandiose thing. He's discovered a new pathology and he's going to put out parental alienation syndrome. There you got your narcissist. Dang, that's where the pathogen hooked him, is on this narcissism. Assessment leads to diagnosis. My kitty here. Diagnosis guides treatment. So he diagnosis. He instead came up with this whole new pathology that significantly below professional standards of practice. So everybody who came out on no empirical supported evidence and all that sort of stuff and slammed him that this is just no new pathologies, they are absolutely correct. That was a violation of professional standards of practice. He did not constrain himself into applying knowledge. I would suggest this because he's a psychiatrist rather than a psychologist. I will also suggest he got captivated by his own counter. And in that, I will cite any sort of narcissistic symptoms that may be involved. So he got captivated, but he identified activity and he's trying to expose it. So in that respect, he's doing well. He is the only mental health person around who's recognizing that there's a pathology there. And he's trying to say, hey, people, look at this. He erred because he said, look at me, look at this. Instead of, hey, people, what's going on here? We should all look at this, and started to apply attachment and personality pathology and diagnostic systems, delusional systems, thought disorders, and bring it into the established knowledge. Instead, he took it away from the established knowledge, and that is extraordinarily problematic. And he's essentially responsible for the last 40 years of not fixing this. But he's also got the other people who should. Here's the thing, the other people, the forensic people, because that was my next look. I looked at parental alienation. I said, awful. Then I looked over and said, where's my psychologist? Where's my forensic psychologist? They're the ones who should be applying knowledge. So this is all. And they're like nowhere. They're like playing with parental alienation, or they're coming up with this new one, estrangement. There's no, watch estrangement. That's a very dangerous construct to use. And so they're just making stuff up. And now they come up with a new one, resistant refusal or something. It's like, stop making stuff up, people. Applying knowledge, it's attachments, family systems, but everybody's making. And that's my psychology people. And I see the violations at 2.04 and 2.01 and 9.01 and 3.04, and it's just rampant, all of them. So I know as soon as I look over to my forensic people and say, where are you guys? I know I'm looking at massive ethical violations in them. They just don't care. They're not doing it, and they're just making stuff up. And they're doing these assessments. Holy cow, $20,000 to $40,000 that takes 6 to 9 months to come back. 6 to 9 months, that's a useless diagnosis. I need to know what happened. What's my treatment plan 6 to 9 months ago? So that's worthless. In clinical psychology, we want to report back in 6 weeks because it's timely. We need that information. So that's insane. $20,000 to $40,000. That is abusively exploitative. You don't need to do all that stuff. And then I read your reports. Oh, yeah, because I'm a consultant on this stuff. I get to read. They are awful, absolutely awful. I mean, I'm writing standard 1.04 letters about your child custody reports. That's what I've got to do next. As soon as I finish this, I'm going to write a 1.04 letter about a custody report. It was a good, I mean, for you guys, you consider it a good custody report. And for me, I'm writing a standard 1.04 letter. So forensic psychology is a nightmare. And so then I said, well, I have to bring it back. Now, when I apply knowledge, it was very interesting to watch. I thought the Gardnerians, they would have the first opportunity to say, oh, yes, and to shift. And they resisted. And they said, no, we're not going to shift. And they're ignoring Dr. Childress like it's possible to ignore knowledge. It's not me, it's the knowledge you're ignoring. And so they think that's a way to do it. And that's going to be very interesting. But they've delayed our ability to solve this by probably 2 or 3 years. So last 2 or 3 years, all the kids that have been, I put that on the responsibility of the Gardnerians, that they're just not like supporting the application of knowledge because they want to be experts in parental alienation, But they're watching parental alienation diagnosis disappear from them, so now they're scrambling around. They can't come up with a new pathology. It has to pass Daubert and Fry, but they can't go to established knowledge because that's what I've been saying all along, and they said no. So I don't know what they're going to do. But they're second. The real ones are the forensic people who should take responsibility, and we'll see what happens with them, whether they do or not. So far, no. But Richard Gardner identified the pathology, and that is accurate. And look what the pathogen did to him. All these false allegations, it savaged him with brutal slander and lies. It distorted what he says, it distorted who he was. And you see that where it started calling him a pedophile and just hit that pedophile term over and over and the constant. And like his statements didn't do him any good on that because he didn't know the pathogen he was working with. Now, I'm a trauma psychologist. My work right before I came over here was in child abuse in the foster care system. I've personally worked with all four of the diagnoses: neglect, physical, sexual, and psychological. So I'm come over here. I know what this pathogen is. It's a ripple of sex abuse. That is the nastiest pathogen on the planet. But it's all inflamed because of the PS diagnosis. So I can't like be telling you people that right off the bat because that's just going to feed in and everything off the scale. And I don't want to get associated with Richard Gardner because, oh my God, it's an awful nightmare. So I'm going to have to get separation from Gardner before I can talk about anything relative to him in any sane sort of way. It's like bringing up Donald Trump now. I bring up Donald Trump and bam, I bring up Richard Gardner, bam. So I want to make it very clear, and so I had to do that for a while. And it's not only very clear, it's true. Gardner and PAS is awful. So so what happened with that? Where are my clinical psychology people? They just were nowhere to be seen. Now, out of the Gardner folks and the folks who are supporting Richard Gardner, they had a responsibility to apply knowledge. I don't know why they didn't. Everybody's saying there's no valid support and it's junk science and all this. Okay, so apply real science. Apply Bowlby, do it. Do what you're criticizing the Gardnerians for. You do it. You forensic people apply knowledge, apply attachment, but they criticize without doing it. Gardeners don't fight back and say, oh, it's not junk science. Meet the standard, apply knowledge, and then you go forward. So that's what I did. I applied knowledge, so I met the standards. Not junk science. It's John Bowlby and Aaron Beck and Salvador Minuchin. This is not junk science. This is applying knowledge. So I met the standards of empirically validated, yeah. The trauma pathogen repeats pattern. So anytime you hear empirically validated research as used around me or attachment-based parental alienation, which there's no such thing, it's actually knowledge. But I need a label for knowledge because you guys are so ignorant you don't know what knowledge is. So I need a label, general label for knowledge. So I call it attachment-based parental alienation to kind of orient you guys. But but you see what happens with Richard Gardner is the pathogen just savaged him, just and around the pedophile allegation. So I knew coming in it was going to attack me, and it was going to attack me on the same patterns. Empirically validated research applied to Richard Gardner doesn't apply when you do knowledge. So that was one way to expose where the pathogen is for anywhere. If anybody uses the argument empirically validated research relative to Dr. Childress and Bowlby, Minuchin, and Beck, you know that's the pathology right there because that's not a relevant argument this time. Last time it was, not this time. So it's a repetition of pattern without understanding the construct. So it's exposing that they're not actually understanding the construct. They're just repeating it mindlessly. And so there's that. And so that's what ABPA is partly designed to do, is to expose the pathogen as it tries to repeat its patterns when they don't apply anymore. I've changed the meaning of the situation on the pathogen, and it won't recognize it. It'll try to do pattern. The interesting one that I was wondering about is the attack on the pedophile, that pedophile attack. And you're seeing it go with like Hillary Clinton, and we're seeing it in the social surround. And I'm just that, and you, oh my God, PAS, it just, but Gardner um, interfered with the cleanliness of exposing whether that was true. It's called the intersubjectivity. You don't know which side is motivating the inflammation. Um, and so I was wondering about that. I know it's going to attack me. That's a fact. As soon as it sees me as a threat to exposing it, it's going to start attacking. The pathogen is court involved. So the moment I start testifying, the pathogen is going to want to undermine my testimony. So it's going to seek ways to do that. It's not going to find ways on the content of what I'm saying because the content's true, and it can't comprehend the constructs because uh, its frontal lobe is shut down. So it doesn't process the content of what I'm saying, but it has to discredit me. So it's going to try to find some vulnerability that it can use to attack and discredit my testimony in court so it can keep doing what it's doing. So I know that going in. So I had to make sure ABPA was very solid. And so that's my 60 page or 40 page ABPA reference list. I put it up on my website. I read all that stuff because I have to be exactly prepared for the attack on every little minor point of everything. I can bring you quotes and I can cite you references on it because I know the pathogen is going to attack. And so I spent some time doing that. That was about 2012. Mostly I was on the personality because I knew the attachment, knew the family. So I spent some time just integrating the personality stuff into everything, doing the research on it. And so I did that because I know it's going to attack. But then it's going to attack on slander and lies, trying to attack me personally somehow. And so I'm wondering how it's going to do that. And so I'm kind of watching, saying how. And first off, I hit, and it was just inflamed around Dorsey Pruder because it loves Dorsey Pruder so much. And it's a malevolent love. You think about sex abuse, that's malevolent, but it's on the bonding system. But it's malevolent. And so the flying monkeys, it's they love Dorsey, but it's a malevolent love. Please don't love me so much because it's that's a nasty one. And so the flying monkeys were attacking her big time because she exposed it. She solves it. So the pathogen hates her because she solved it. So she's getting hit big time. And then I looked around. I saw the Richard Rorschach thing, and I say that's of interest. And then I'm looking around and I'm watching Rorschach get hit so savagely by the pathogen, and it wants to destroy him and it wants to destroy his work. And I'm thinking, if he's got a program here, we should be researching, we should be bringing out and doing more of it, finding out more of it and doing more of it. Instead, we're trying to suppress it and stop it viciously. I said, that's not, yeah, that's the pathogen here, and that's the flying monkey component. And where it attacked him was on the protective separation. And it was because anytime you advocate separating a child, they would say that's a bonded relationship, ripping the child away from a bonded relationship. And going back to the same vulnerability that Gardner got into, as long as you don't diagnose what the pathology is, you're going to be vulnerable because diagnosis guides treatment. So you're going to what the treatment recommendation is without basing it on a diagnosis. You're skipping a step. And that's the problem over here. It started with Gardner. Everybody's skipping a step. Diagnosis guide. How do you know if it's cancer or diabetes if you haven't diagnosed what it is, but everybody's treating something because you call it parental alienation and you think that you've diagnosed? No, you haven't diagnosed it. There's no such thing. Illusion. Oh, now we got a diagnosis. And then it's child abuse. Oh, now we got a diagnosis. Now with the child abuse diagnosis, we know that protective separation is needed. That's the piece, the link that was missing. I don't know why he doesn't do it. Richard Rorschach's just start applying ABPA criteria and get a diagnosis of the psychological abuse, and you get justification for the protective separation. I don't know why. But I'm watching this pathogen savage him along those lines. And so that's the flying. And I'm coming into this, so I know I'm going to get hit with this. And then Dorsey shows up, and she says she had worked with Randy Rand, and shows me the high road that she has protocol. And that's like a professional thing kind of to do. You say, hey, I got this solution here. And I looked at it and, oh, I see what you, okay, I get it. I get it. It's not like anything we do in psychotherapy. So that's why it can recover the kid in such a short time through like not intensive, but 4 days. I mean, long. It's a condensed intervention. It's not intensive. It's very gentle, but it's just 4 days and everything's fixed. And actually 2 days, 3 days, and then the rest is preparing for the what you do afterwards. Because once you put them back together, they're kind of like, what do we do now? Bonded. And so you kind of have to give them a little support and move them on. So that's the last little bit of the workshop. But the first part, I understood what was happening. And I go, I get it. I see what she's doing. And I said, I was talking about how this happened and what happened. And she worked with Jane Majors. And so she's worked with people in the field trying to figure things out. And one of the people was Randy Rand. And Randy apparently, now I don't know, I've never talked to Randy, but by her report, Randy was sort of the developer of the model for the family bridges, and then Rorschach came and then collaborated in the presentation of it. But I'll let them talk about it. Let her talk about it. But so now I get the family bridges is using the same basic principles. So when people say, "What's my referral for interventions or something?" I've seen Dorsey. I've seen her work over the last 5 years. I know she absolute fact recovers things. Her standards of practice are at top rate, and so I know I'm comfortable on that side. People ask me about family bridges. I go, I haven't seen the protocol, and the research that's been published on it is soft. It's not quality, and so I'd like to see a better quality of data outcome relevant to the child's symptoms. So on parent-child relationship rating scale, I'd like to see what their outcome measures are relative to attachment, affection, emotional regulation, cooperation, mood and arousal, social involvement. So that's the outcome measure I'd like to see on that. But that might be for the courts and everybody, if you're considering that, that's in the scope. Let's put it that way. Um, so okay, Dorsey comes along. Now, Dorsey's getting slammed by the flying monkeys with slander and lies because they want to stop her. Now, I know it's going to wind up attacking me at the same point. It just doesn't see me as a threat yet because its frontal lobes are turned off and it can't process the content of what I'm saying. I'm just not, at that point, I'm not actively interfering with it doing its pathology. Now, in family therapy, yeah, I am. And then it filed licensing board complaints and even a malpractice lawsuit that they later dropped because on this same thing, because it attacks. If you try to interfere with it, it attacks. And attacks with slander and lies. It's a delusional pathology. It makes stuff up. And so interesting. On the case, I could see what the pathology is. For like, I was on the case for only a couple months, but like for every month that I treated, I had a chart that was that big, for a month. And I only saw like the kid maybe like 4 or 5 times in a month, maybe six. But my chart's that big because I'm preparing for the attack. So, but at that time, in the public surround, I'm not getting attacked. So, but then I support Dorsey. Now the attack shows up, and you can go back if you want, like in content now. Let's go back to my other Facebook time, and you can see the attacks are at Dorsey and at me for being interfering with them getting to Dorsey. So they're not actually attacking me; they're attacking me for supporting Dorsey. They want to get me off so they can get to her. So that was the early version. Now, the reason I'm partly bringing this up now is because now it sees me as a threat. Because now I'm testifying in court. Okay, now I'm messing with it. Now I'm interfering with it. So it's got its forensic allies are going to turn and they're going to try to hurt me. And the Gardnerian allies, I don't think will try. Their strategy is just to like make me go away and ignore me. And they're kind of, I'm not sure, irrelevant at this point. They're falling off the edge of relevancy. Let's put it that way. So now the pathogens come after me, and the interesting question I had that's been answered is the pedophile line. Is that going to show up relative to Dr. Childers? And yeah, it shows up. And so again, there's more evidence of the sex abuse origins of this particular pathogen. It's repeating patterns and it's repeating themes. And for Gardner, it was unclear. For for the court-involved stuff in PA, it's unclear. Child allegations of sex abuse, it's unclear. There's all these things that lack clarity. But Dr. Childress, okay, I'm serious. It's pretty clear. And that yet for me to draw that, then that's a theme that's underlying this. And that goes to support what I'm saying all along, that this is a ripple of sex abuse pathogen. And the psychologists over here, the forensic people just need to like disappear as a field. But the people in forensic, if you're going to be serious about this, you have to move over and start looking at the trauma pathology and the ripple of trauma pathology and attachment pathology. And you have to stop making up pathologies and actually apply knowledge to do this, because otherwise you're unethical. And that's going to be a violations of a lot of stuff, duty of care violations. The, um, the thing for the psychology people is the thought disorder. It's a thought disorder pathology coming out of trauma. You reference Beck and schemas and the thought disorder schemas that produce the personality pathology. And the moment you get the thought disorder, you need to assess for the thought disorder. What's the assessment for a thought disorder? A mental status exam of thought and perception. You need to start doing that relative to the allied parent and the potential for a shared persecutory delusion of the allied parent with the child, just as we see in the cultural surround between Trump and Trump cult. And just like we have to cut off Twitter and YouTube and Parler and all the ways he can transmit the pathology to the child, we have to provide the child with a protective separation from the pathology of the pathogenic parent. That is a professional obligation of the psychologists under their duty to protect the child from psychological child abuse. If you fail to even conduct a proper assessment for a thought disorder or possible thought disorder pathology here, you are failing to show proper care in your assessment. And that would be a violation of both 9.01A of the APA Ethics Code, but it's also negligence for failure to show proper care in what you're doing. So, so that's the truth, and that's where we're going. All you psychology people, there are actual standards of practice that are coming in, and the forensic psychology people have felt themselves exempt from professional standards of practice because you're working with courts and forensic psychology, and we do something different. No, you don't. Not when it comes to ethics. In ethics, you don't do something different. Now, you can do court-involved stuff, but you have to be ethical in what you do. And that's Standard 2.04. That's Bowlby, Minuchin, Beck, Vanderkook, Tronick, Kohut, and the ICD-10 and DSM-5. And then if you want to make up new pathologies after that, go ahead and do it. The features that I want to talk about here, though, emphasize at this point in time regarding Gardner and PAS, is that Richard Gardner showed immense courage in confronting this pathogen. This is the nastiest pathogen on the planet. I will not defend some standards of practice stuff he did, but in terms of his courage, immense courage. And he took it on, and he stood toe to toe with it in its savagery and brutality. And I think once we reach a place of reflection in history, I think history will judge Trump according to his acts. And I think once we reach a place in history that has a more balanced perspective of the pathology, I think Richard Gardner will achieve a more balanced and appreciative view of his work. However, the pathogen infected his work through his narcissism and through his laziness, and the laziness that narcissism produces. It shuts off frontal lobe executive functions. They can't apply logical reasoning. They can't apply knowledge because the frontal lobe is shut off. And that's why he resonated with the trauma, because of his likely that's rippling somehow countertransference. So he saw it, but he failed to apply the executive functions necessary. So I think there will come a time for a more balanced perspective on Richard Gardner. I think what happened with the pathogen got a hold of him and produced bait for the parents. So now the parents jump on this parental alienation idea, there's no diagnosis of that, so there's never any identification what the pathology is, and everybody starts fighting about whether or not it's parental alienation rather than getting a diagnosis. Is this a thought disorder? Oh, mental status exam with thought perception. We can ask. Is this parental alienation? There's no assessment for that. Is it even real? And everybody starts fighting. That's the pathogen. It got everybody fighting and looking where? In the court system. It gets people fighting in the court, and parents are trying to prove a pathology to a judge. Does a judge diagnose? No, he's not licensed. Why aren't you getting a diagnosis out of mental health? No, this pathogen is extraordinarily manipulative. If you want to see how manipulative this pathogen is, look what it got everybody doing. It got everybody fighting for a diagnosis, proving it to a judge. Judges don't diagnose pathology. Go get a psychologist to diagnose it, and then come back to the diagnosis and say, "This is what it is, judge," and the judge makes a decision about that. So my screen just went blank. So that's the issue around Richard Gardner. I think we need to be um, reach a more balanced perspective relative to him, but I think we need to discard absolutely the bait of parental alienation that takes us into court and court trials and stuff. And we need to return to a healthcare, which is a proper path, and this return to the professional practices that Gardner skipped and that all forensic psychology skips and everybody's skipping, which is assessment leads to diagnosis, diagnosis guides treatment. The treatment for cancer is different than the treatment for diabetes. So, what's the diagnosis? And regarding any pathology, you tell me the diagnosis, I will tell you the treatment plan. So, if I'm testifying and you say, "What's the treatment for this, Dr. Childress?" I say, "I don't know. What's the diagnosis?" I will tell you exactly what the treatment is for. So, with Richard Rorschach, I want to extend one step further courage and courage of Randy Rand. Now, Randy Rand and his wife Deidre were my introduction to parental alienation because I had this article up on the web, and so that they're the first ones that introduced me to the construct that I came in on. Um, I think they're subject to the same criticisms, valid criticisms on 2.04 and 2.01 and 9.01 and stuff. And yet at the same time, it speaks to the courage of those who were at least recognizing the pathology and the savagery of the attacks on them. And in professional psychology, we have to stop attacking people with solutions. Instead, we have to start understanding what they're doing and start doing more of that. And right now, the best top human who solves this all the time, I know what she does. I know she understands this pathology as spot on as well as I do. She solves it. I see it. She recovers kids. She recovers families all the time. And that's why she's my first referral, and that's why I support her, is Miss Dorsey Purder. So if anybody out there is wise or smart, talk to her. She will explain everything to you. Um, yeah, so that's my discussion of Gardner and PAS, family bridges in that zone. I have not reviewed family bridges protocol. You can speak to Ms. Pruder, or they can speak to it as whether or not they use the same approach and to the intervention. But I will say the courts and therapists and people, the model that would be used by Family Bridges, or I'll let Dorsey speak to that, or by the High Road, is not psychotherapy. It's not in any way problematic for the child. In fact, children love it. You can see that on the ABA, PA, High Road data. that the in the B one, you see the child just rocketing up on all three scales: affection, cooperation, social. They're just boom. The child loves being in the workshop. It feels really great, which I suspect it does. Recovering from like complex trauma, child abuse probably does feel really good. And so don't worry about it. It's not a bad thing. That's what the pathology is trying to scare you about everything. Oh, and it lies. It lies all the time, and it's trying to scare people. It's because it's scared. It's a persecutory delusion. There's dangers. No, there's no dangers. Not with Dorsey, not with High Road, and so everybody needs to ratchet down, and people need to start working together. I'm a psychologist. She's a coach and a businesswoman. We do entirely different things. But I'm not no business associate. But she solves it, so I'm going to refer. And that's what everybody needs to start doing. Is we need to start looking at people who have solutions, start doing more of that. So with that, I'm gonna wrap this up here on my discussion of Gardner PAS and the various savage attacks on anybody who tries to solve this. And we need to stop doing that.